Part 74. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 731. Chapter 731. The eve of the ceremony. Li Lei felt that he was going to be unlucky. The way Xia Moyan looked at him, how could it look like it didn't hurt at all? Sure enough, when Xia Moyan grabbed his hand, even the way he held the knife was different. The knife cut it, and the pain made Li Lei Shan change his color. He couldn't help but sucked in a breath, and was about to break into a cold sweat. This brother-in-law's knife skills are really amazing. It doesn't hurt at all when it doesn't hurt. Even women and children like Xiaoling and Xiao Hui didn't feel it. However, once it hurts someone, it is really cruel. Thinking that Li Lei had been on the battlefield for so many years, he had experienced a lot of life and death, and had seen the world, but Xia Moyan's sword strike, damn it, it hurt even more than the serious injuries he suffered on the battlefield back then. It hurts so much that it makes you faint. His body was trembling a little, and he felt like he was sweating all over his body. He was experiencing cold and hot spells, and the strongest feeling was the dark pain. I heard from Grandpa that there are many acupuncture points in human blood, and touching some acupuncture points makes people so painful that they want to die. Could it be that this brother-in-law with ulterior motives chose those acupoints to attack? Xia Moyan looked at him calmly. Does it hurt? Li Lei raised his head with difficulty, his eyes were filled with stars, and he looked at the calm expression of the brother-in-law opposite him, feeling extremely sad and angry. Damn it, it hurts him so much, but he pretends to be fine. Are there any such assholes? Scheming. Green tea and white lotus. He used all the words he could think of to scold a certain high-ranking national preceptor in his heart. On the surface, he had to pretend to be calm. It hurts? How is that possible? Even his voice was low and lazy, even calmer than Xia Moyan. Xia Moyan had to admire him a little. He picked the most severe acupuncture point to start with. He remembered that when he was studying with his father, he was poked at this acupointment for the first time. It hurt so much that he shed tears. At that time, he was just poked once, but now, it is so painful. Lei Ke was cut by the knife, and you can imagine how painful it must be. Finally, this man still has some merits. Looking at Li Lei, who was enduring the pain, Xia Moyan's eyes softened. Xiaoling also noticed something was wrong with Li Lei and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Li Lei's initial and most severe pain had subsided. He took a deep breath secretly and gave her a warm smile. "It's okay. I wasn't mentally prepared just now." I was shocked seeing that she was still a little worried. He added, "You still can't believe my brother's knife skills? It won't hurt at all." Xiaoling then nodded doubtfully. Li Lei secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He was more worried about Xiaoling's heartache than his own pain. After comforting Xiaoling, she looked up at her brother-in-law again and smiled even brighter. Xia Moyan. After enduring it for a while, seeing that this brat felt so sorry for his sister, the reserved and arrogant master decided not to continue harming him. Xiao Shaowai looked at the blood of the three people in the bowl curiously. "Uncle and uncle, what is this for?" Xia Mo said without hesitation. He took out a box with a simple pattern from his arms and opened it. A blast of cold air hit my face, and the box was filled with ice cubes. Among the ice cubes, there was a translucent silk thread. Xia Moyan took out the long silk thread and dipped it into the blood donations of the three people. After a while, when I took it out again, the silk thread had been dyed red. Several people looked at Xia Moyan's movements curiously. Xia Moyan's was very fast, with complex and graceful movements. He quickly tied the silk thread into a wishful knot and put it back into the cold box. He pushed the small box in front of Xiaoling. "Take it." Xiaoling looked confused. Is the ceremony completed? From now on, she can tell the world about her son's life experience and be together happily. Just thinking about it makes people excited. However, Xiaomoyan was greeted with a bucket of cold water. The ceremony hasn't started yet. Xia Xiaoling's whole body felt bad. Then what were we doing just now? Xiaomoyan said calmly, what you just did was just preparations before the ceremony. He took out another map, spread it out, and pointed to a red dot in the map. You need to go to the northernmost snow-capped mountains. Bury this wish-fulfilling knot on the highest mountain. Remember, starting from the foot of the mountain, you must only climb it on foot as a family of 3. You cannot use tools such as cable cars or helicopters, and you cannot ask for help from others. Xiaoling was still silently studying which snow mountain this was. Li Lei had already frowned. All 3 of the family are going up. He was not afraid, but what about Xiaoling and Xiaohui? Can you endure that kind of hardship? Xiaomoyan seemed to have read through his mind. Yes, all 3 members of the family are going up the mountain. One more person is not enough, and one less one is not enough. Doesn't he want to carry this unsightly sycamore tree up the mountain alone? How could he bear to let his own sister and such a young nephew take risks if there was even the slightest way? Unfortunately, there is really nothing we can do. No matter how powerful the Xia family is, they cannot defeat the laws of heaven and earth. Xiaomoyan's eyes were slightly dark. Li Lei was a little confused by him and thought about this problem. If there was really a way, why wouldn't this brother-in-law who disliked him not take the opportunity to let him go up the mountain alone? He gave a wry smile. Okay. Is there a time limit? Xiaomoyan glanced at him appreciatively. This broken piece of wood didn't have any merit. At least it could get the question to the point quickly when it came to the facts. He likes to talk to smart people. There is no time limit. You can give Xiaoling and Xiaohui some special mountaineering training, and wait until they adapt before setting off. Li Lei also planned this and nodded. The matter was settled like this. Xiaoling is not too worried about herself. She has died once and can handle such a risky sport calmly. I am worried about Xiao Xiaohui. The child is too young, barely 5 years old. How can he climb such a steep and dangerous snow mountain? The sun is shining brightly in the afternoon. The staff at the mountain villa purchased training props and built a special room to simulate the cold and hypoxic environment on the snow-capped mountains. Xiaoling watched the little Xiaohui adjust to the room through the glass. His baby-fat little face was red from the cold, and his little teeth were chattering uncontrollably. A look of worry appeared on her face unconsciously. Li Lei walked up behind her at some point and looked at his son in the glass room with her. There is only a layer of transparent glass between them, but the indoors and outdoors are a world of ice and fire. He is proud of his son. In such a harsh environment, the little guy has been persevering, and it can be seen that he is very calm. He climbed the simulated snow and peaks indoors with unsteady steps. It was obviously his first time, but he firmly remembered all the key points. Never fell into the snow nest once. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 732. Chapter 732. Li Xiaoli seeks death. He will become an excellent warrior, Li Lei said. Many children at the Li family headquarters have received rigorous training since childhood, and none of them performed as well as Xiao Xiaohui. The talent shown by this child is by no means a mere talent. Given time, he will definitely become something great. Xiaoling frowned slightly. She didn't want him to become a warrior, she just wanted him to be safe. Li Lei took a few steps forward and hugged her shoulders. Don't worry, nothing will happen to you on this trip to the snowy mountains. I will protect you. Even if God wants to touch you, you must step over my body. What are you talking about? She became anxious and glared at him. The departure is about to begin, why can't this person say something auspicious? Looking at her somewhat annoyed look, he laughed, lowered his head, and kissed her gently. She was a little flustered and wanted to turn her head away, but he held her in place with one hand, holding her chin. semi-forcing her to bear him. Lingering kiss. His breath contained the fragrance of green grass, as well as the coldness that had just come out of the ice and snow room, mixed with the man's hormonal body temperature, intertwined into an intoxicating smell that belonged only to him. Xiaoling was lost in his kiss, her petite body gradually went limp, and she couldn't help but let out a cry. Li Lei's hand reached into the skirt of her clothes and touched her waist. Xiaoling, his voice was hoarse. Xiaoling's body seemed to have electricity flowing through it, making her want to escape and get more. Her mind went blank, she was confused and overwhelmed by his caress. Li Lei's condition was no better than hers. He had been fascinated by her for a long time. He pressed her against the translucent outer wall of the glass room, pressed her up, and kissed her deeply. Li Lei. The cold touch on her back brought back her remaining sanity. She realized that she was outdoors in broad daylight, and there was a little child in the room behind her who was training hard. "Don't be like this," she said weakly, her voice as quiet as a mosquito. Li Leiake ignored it and continued to ask for it. As if sensing something, Xiao Shaowai, who had been concentrating on practicing, suddenly turned his head and looked outside. He saw his mother being pressed against the glass wall as clear and crystal clear as ice and snow by his father. The pale golden sunlight was refracted and enveloped their bodies, making them look as charming and lingering as a fairyland scroll. "Oh, this is not something a good boy should watch," Xiao Shaowai said to himself, stretching out his two little paws to cover his eyes. "I couldn't help but secretly open my fingers to take a look." Without paying attention, I stepped on the ground and fell into the snow nest. The coach on the side. He reached out and fished out the little child and scolded him, "You have to concentrate, you know. If you look around like this on a real snow mountain, you will die, do you know?" Little Shaowai, covered in snow all over his face, couldn't help but look towards his parents. The coach really wants to rush out and yell at a man and woman who are kissing each other so much that they forget about each other. "Can't you stay away and not harm the flowers of the motherland?" However, considering that my salary is paid by others, I still endure it. He turned sideways, blocking Xiao Shaowai's sight, and continued to scold him with a serious face. "I told you at the beginning of the training, you are not allowed to look around when walking, and you must stop when you look around, do you understand?" Oh, Xiao Shaowai responded obediently, paused, and asked curiously, Coach, if my sister and Uncle Li were playing and kissing like this on the snowy mountain, would it be dangerous? When I fell into a snow nest while kissing, what should I do?" The coach laughed angrily, "Is that what you need to worry about?" Xiao Shaowai was yelled at, his head drooped, and he continued to practice. Over there, Xiaoling was kissed by Li Lei until her whole body went limp. She felt a part of his body gradually bulge, and she stretched out her hand to push him. "Don't." Li Lei didn't listen to her and suddenly picked her up and strode towards the room. Before he took a few steps, he was stopped by someone. "Get out." Men are usually very irritable at this time, and classmate Li Xiaolai is no exception. What's more, he is holding in his arms a beauty he has not tasted for many years. However, he was only halfway through the word gun when he suddenly stopped and said with a dry smile, brother. Xia Moyan looked at him expressionlessly. Xiaoling half opened her misty eyes, with a charming blush on her cheeks. Before she could figure out what was going on, she said with unsteady breath, "Put me down." Suddenly, I felt my body was lifted into the air, and a strong hand lifted me to the ground by the back of my neck. With her feet on the ground, she became more awake. She raised her eyes and saw her brother, who was so high above him that he seemed to be in a different world. Recalling the scene with Li Lei just now, I was actually caught by my brother, my God. Xia Xiaoling's face turned red and she wanted to find a crack in the ground and burrow down immediately. "Are you ready for today's training?" Xia Moyan asked coldly. Okay, she stumbled and replied, I am going back to my room to rest first. He ran away as if running away. The miserable classmate Li Xiaoli was left behind to confront his angry brother-in-law. Brother, Li Lei still smiled dryly and wanted to explain. Xiaomoyan's words came out through his teeth, you have good physical strength, huh? This, classmate Li Xiaoli is confused. How should he answer this kind of question? Let's just say he doesn't have enough physical strength. Where is his dignity as a man? To say that he has good physical strength, it is obvious that he is adding fuel to the brother-in-law's fire. Classmate Li Xiaoli was about to cry. He blamed himself for not setting up more warnings nearby. Why didn't anyone remind him when his brother-in-law came? After thinking for a long time and looking at his brother-in-law who was obviously waiting for his reply, classmate Li Xiaoli said bravely, it's okay. As soon as the words came out, I felt something bad. Xiaomoyan across from me narrowed her eyes dangerously, it's okay? That means the amount of exercise is not enough? Let's go, I will practice with you. After finishing speaking, he opened his long legs and took the lead into the training room filled with ice and snow. Hours later, Xiaoling had already returned to her room, took a shower, calmed down her heart, and waited until dinner time. The maid from the villa came to invite her to the restaurant for dinner and said, Mr. Xia and young Master Shaowai are waiting for you. She then went to the restaurant and found that Li Lei was not there. Where are the others? She asked a little strangely, sitting down next to Xiao Hui. Although I was still a little embarrassed when facing my brother, but, we are all adults, so the embarrassment will pass after a while, ahem. Xiaomoyan said nothing. Xiao Shaowai said with sympathy, Dad, he. Xiaomoyan glanced at the child with a vague expression. Xiao Shaowai said wittily, Dad was giving me a demonstration in the training room in the afternoon. He just came out and was a little tired. He probably went to rest. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 733. Chapter 733 Free Travel in the Snow Mountains. Xiaoling had no doubt that he was there, then let's eat first. Speaking, he picked up the tableware. Xiaomoyan looked away with a vague look, and Xiao Shaowai breathed a sigh of relief silently, woo woo woo, uncle is so terrible, my father is so pitiful, he has suffered so much and still can't let his mother know, woo 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 hoo. Looking back on the scene in the afternoon, what should be demonstrated? It's clearly uncle who is unilaterally abusing dad, okay. Ask dad to show him what wrong actions are and what the consequences will be, once is not enough, he has to demonstrate repeatedly. As a result, dad climbed the snow peak n times, was buried in the snow n times, and stepped on the snow nest n times. And even performed a performance of freezing to death. Xiao Shaowai felt so cruel just thinking about it. With his uncle's power, he dared not speak out when he was young. Having lived with his uncle for several years, he deeply understands that if he has trouble with his uncle at this time, he has trouble with himself. What about pocket money, comfortable leisure time, snacks, and good luck? Everything will disappear. The little child lowered his head silently and picked up the rice. After Xiaoling finished her meal, she originally wanted to go see Li Lei, but when she thought of the scene this afternoon, she couldn't help but blush and her heart beat again, and she immediately took back the steps she had just taken. Mom, come over and watch TV with us, Xiao Shaowai shouted. Xiaomoyan gave him a look of approval. Well, this child is becoming more and more aware of current affairs. He knows how to stop his mother from sneaking into his father's room. He is a good boy. Step aside to make a seat available for Xiaoling. Xiaoling sat down and watched TV with them absent-mindedly. When she was drowsy, she suddenly saw a piece of news. The incident of deworming poisoning in the orphanage 4 years ago has been re-investigated by the police, and it has been confirmed that Gu's company, the eldest lady, Gu Lin, was the instigator behind the scenes today. The court sentenced Gu Lin to life imprisonment, which will be executed immediately. Xiaoling looked at the news with mixed emotions. The verdict was finally pronounced. She finally sought justice for the 2 orphans who died innocently and tragically 4 years ago. But, so what? There is no resurrection for dead people, and no matter how severe the punishment is for criminals, it is impossible to save the lives of children. She was depressed and hung her head. Besides, Xia Mo said, evil will be rewarded with evil. What about good retribution? She asked softly. What did those 2 children do wrong? Xia Moyan raised his hand and touched her soft hair. This girl didn't know that on the day when the 2 orphans were buried, the requiem she sang for them as a phoenix was enough to make them safe and prosperous in the next life. This is a great reward. Want to see Gu Lin? Xia Moyan asked, to see what happens to the wicked. Xiaoling shook her head, not interested. It was enough to know that the girl was sentenced. Although the girl was just a spoiled young lady, it was not that no one gave her a chance. If, 4 years later, if you don't trouble yourself, then this dusty past will be covered up forever. It's also because Gu Lin's blessings have been used up, right? You will not live if you do your own evil. Xiaoling lowered her head and taught Xiao Shuai, you have to be a good person, you know. Yeah, Xiao Shuai nodded heavily and looked at Gu Lin on the TV. On the TV, Gu Lin was wearing a yellow prison uniform, her hair was shaved, her face was very haggard, she was crying and yelling, I was wronged. I was wronged. Save me, save me. Yasin Ling, you this bitch. Xiaoling frowned. At this time, does Miss Gu still have the intention to curse? Xia Moyan said calmly, I can change her sentence to death. Xiaoling was slightly startled, then said, no need. What does the death penalty mean? We must let her live, endure endless imprisonment and torture, wear coarse clothes and do heavy work for a long time, and reminisce about the prosperous days behind a tall iron window. She can never go back. Is the most painful. Xia Moyan saw through her thoughts and nodded approvingly. Well, at least the sister was not a virgin, so he felt relieved. You are so popular now, there are probably fans of yours in the prison, Xia Mo said calmly. I will tell the prison authorities and ask them to lock Gu Lin and your fans together. Xiaoling laughed, brother, you are so bad. Little Shuai on the side shuddered, Mom, do you know? Uncle is the most terrifying person in the world, Wu. He had some sympathy for the handcuffed Aunt Gu Lin on TV. After living in the villa for a few more days, with rigorous training day after day, Xiaoling and Xiao Shuai both mastered the essentials of climbing the snow-capped mountains, and they were ready to set out to bury the wishful knot. Xia Moyan said, then, be careful on the road, I'm leaving. Xiaoling reluctantly said goodbye to her brother, while classmate Li Xiaoli also had mixed emotions as she bid farewell to her brother-in-law, who had amazing abilities and was very difficult to deal with. The family set out north, took a private plane, and arrived at the foot of the snow-capped mountains within a few days. Looking up, looking at the high snow-capped mountains. It's so beautiful, it's Xiao Shuai. The little child seems to be born without knowing what fear is, and does not feel at all how difficult it is to conquer the majestic and steep snow-capped mountains. He is as happy as an outing. Xiaoling also nodded. The snow-capped mountains are beautiful, yes. Li Lei checked the luggage of the 3 of them for the last time. Most of the load was carried on his back, such as tents, ice picks, snow shovels and other equipment, while Xiaoling and Xiao Shuai only carried some necessary food, medicines, and flashlights to prevent danger if lost. The 3 people headed towards the snow-capped mountains cautiously. Gradually going up from the foot of the mountain, at first, the was not very steep and the climate was not bad. They often encountered tourist groups. Those people looked at their family of three curiously. From time to time, well-meaning people said, "Where are you from? Come? Are you separated from your tour group? Come join us, it's very dangerous in the snowy mountains with so few people." Xiaoling is a big star. She wears a hood to cover most of her face. She doesn't speak and acts aloof. Every time, Lilei smiled in a good-natured way. "No, we are individual travelers, there are only 3 of us, we can travel freely." Free travel, the tourists were all surprised, especially when they looked at the young Xiaohui. They were speechless. Such a young child, you actually ask him to follow you to travel freely, are you going to die? Lilei still smiled, held Xiao Hui's little hand and walked away. The people in the tour group looked at them with disapproval. Among them, a woman walked up to the tour guide. "Do you think their behavior is suspicious? Could they be kidnapping children across the border?" The tour guide shook his head and sneered, "Abducting children across the border? You can't take this route. If you go over this road and haven't reached the border yet, I'm afraid the child will have died long ago." "But," he said thoughtfully, "it's really strange. I'm afraid there's something fishy about taking such a young child into the mountains and not joining a group." "Shall we follow them and take a look?" said the good-hearted person. "It's for their own good. These 3 people don't know the heights of the world. What if something happens, with us following them, they will be safer." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 734. Chapter 734 The Imagination of the Masses. Got windy. In the snow-capped mountains, Xiaoling opened her hood and took a breath. The wind and snow poured in, forcing her to wrap her gear tightly again. They had been climbing towards the snow peak and had walked a long way. Lilei was walking at the front, little Xiaohui was walking in the middle following his footprints, and she was walking behind them. Looking at the 2 figures, one large and one small, in front of her, she felt a little dazed. I don't think so at ordinary times, but at this moment, Xiaohui really looks like Lilei. His back, hair color, and even his walking posture are all carved from the same mold. The little child has been imitating his father, holding his head high and strutting, trying to act like a little man. However, he was too young, and his father's steps were a bit big, so he had to jump 2 steps from time to time in order to accurately step on his father's footprints. Fortunately, the father took care of their mother and son, so they didn't go too fast. "Take your time, don't be in a hurry," he said, "follow my footsteps and you won't miss anything." He explored the path ahead for them, stepping on the originally soft snow so that they wouldn't miss it. Danger of falling. The cold wind mixed with scattered snowflakes whistled through his short hair. Xiaoling looked at his back, and a very stable feeling slowly emerged in her heart, as if as long as this man was here, no matter the unfamiliar snow-capped mountains or any dangers, they were not worth mentioning. "I don't know how long I've been walking." Lilei suddenly stopped. The little child couldn't hold back his momentum and hit his father's back with his nose. Lilei turned around and gave the child a hand. "What's wrong?" Xiaoling asked. "Someone is following us," Lilei said. "Huh?" Xiaoling was startled and turned around instinctively. Sure enough, she saw a group of travelers coming in their direction in the distance. She pointed at them along the way. After seeing them turn back, she pretended to be nothing. He turned his head and looked at the sky, the ground, and the scenery, but not at them. It seems something is not quite right. Xiaoling frowned. Why are they following us? Could they be ordinary travelers who happen to take the same path as us? This road is not a regular tourist route, Lilei replied briefly, raised his telescope, and looked down. After a moment, he smiled. They suspect that we are human traffickers, and some people think that we are treasure hunters, tomb robbers, bringing a child to sacrifice, To open a secret treasure somewhere or something. Xiaoling was stunned. What kind of mess is this? Have you read too much Tomb Raiders? She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Li Lei also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The imagination of the masses has always been very rich. Xiaoling thought of something. They are so far away, how do you know what they said? Li Lei, I can read lips. He grew up in a gangster family. When he was 10 years old, he left home alone to work as a mercenary. Without some extraordinary skills, he would have died countless times. Xiaoling nodded. This man knew so many skills that she was no longer surprised. Xiao Hui, on the other hand, looked very excited. Dad, I want to learn too. Can you teach me how to lip read? Okay, Li Lei responded with a smile and touched Xiao Hui's little head, but only a layer of snowflakes came off. It didn't snow in the mountains, but the cold wind howled, bringing scattered snowflakes down from the top of the mountain, and gradually accumulated a lot on people's bodies. Li Lei looked around and said to them, let's go, hold on a little longer, and if we climb up a bit, there will be a cave for us to stay tonight. This is the result of the reconnaissance by the advance troops he sent. Xiaoling and Xiao Hui nodded, followed him, and continued walking up despite the wind and snow. Sure enough, after walking for a while, we arrived at a cave. The cave was very dry, and there were grain reserves and dry firewood left by the advance troops Li Lei sent out half a month ago. Li Lei lit a fire, hoisted a stainless steel lunch box to melt the snow, and broke off a few pieces of dried meat and grains to put in. The family is waiting for dinner around the campfire. The firelight reflected Xiaoling's delicate eyebrows, which were dyed with a bright red color, making her look uniquely beautiful. While she was warming herself up by the fire, she asked Li Lei, will those people always follow us? It's hard to say, Li Lei replied, they are just ordinary travelers. They followed us on a whim. It's possible that they can stay with us for 10 days and a half or give up immediately. That's really annoying. Xiaoling was not very happy. Climbing such a dangerous snow-capped mountain with such a young son is already very irritating, but there are still people who are ignorant and want to find out. How do we get rid of them? She asked. Li Lei spread out the map by the light of the fire and pointed it out to her. The tourist area ends here, which is still half a day's journey from us. Beyond that is the dangerous zone where tourists stop. They are traveling in a group, and the tour guide should not allow them. They continue to go to the penalty area. Let's go faster tomorrow and enter the penalty area. Xiaoling nodded. At present, it seems that this is the only way. The family had a meal amidst the howling wind and snow. Li Lei even found a pack of hot chocolate among the supplies left by the advance team, boiled it with snow water, and shared it to drink. After eating and drinking enough, Xiaoling's body felt warm, and she fell asleep in a daze while hugging Xiao Hui, who also had a round belly. Li Lei stayed by their side, but did not sleep. He looked at the mother and son tenderly and intently in the light of the extinguishing fire. Xiaoling, he murmured, with infinite love in his voice. It wasn't until dawn that he woke up Xiaoling and asked her to keep watch while he slept for a while. The family continues on the road. It took half a day to leave the safe tourist area and enter the restricted area. It's dangerous going up from here. Li Lei looked serious, but his voice was very soft. Do you still remember the key points during training? You must follow my footsteps, don't look around when walking, and don't talk loudly. If it causes an avalanche, everyone will be buried alive. Xiaoling nodded solemnly. Xiao Shaowai also nodded his head heavily. Li Lei then led them up, step by step, more slowly and carefully than before. The snowy peak has 9 twists and turns. It seems like a long walk, but in fact, it is difficult and steep, and you can't climb very far. Suddenly, faintly, I heard voices coming from below. Xiaoling looked back and saw that it was the tour group from yesterday chasing them to the edge of the restricted area. The tour group stopped at the edge and did not go deep inside. Several people pointed at them and didn't know what they were talking about. For some reason, Xiaoling felt a little uneasy and tugged at Li Lei. At this time, Li Lei also noticed the strange movement below. His expression changed and he felt something was wrong. He saw a tourist from the tour group curling his hands into a trumpet shape and shouted to them, "Hey, where are you going? Then the edge is off limits, danger." The man's voice echoed in the empty snow-capped mountains, lingering in the air. Faintly, there was a muffled thunder-like sound coming from the top of the mountain. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 735. Chapter 735, Survival of the Snow. Xiaoling only felt snow hitting her face. Just when he was about to look up, his body was suddenly tackled by Li Lei. Danger, avalanche. She felt the world was spinning for a while, and before she had time to scream, her whole body was buried in the overwhelming snowflakes, her vision went dark, and she lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she felt a sharp pain in her temples, and some warm liquid flowed into her mouth, with a fishy sweet taste. Her vision went black for a while, and she couldn't see the surrounding scene clearly. Before the deafening roar passed, snow particles splashed onto her cheeks from time to time, which was cold and painful. She moved. A pair of solid and strong arms hugged her tighter. Only then did she realize that she was curled up in someone's arms, leaning against his warm chest. His body was like a small boat in the storm, creating a safe world for her. She gradually regained consciousness. Remembering where I was and what had just happened, after the tourist shouted, a large-scale avalanche occurred. The snow on the top of the mountain roared down with thunderous force, swallowing people up in an instant. At the last moment, she remembered that it was Li Lei who caught her, so the person holding her now must be Li Lei. But Xiaowai. Where is Xiaowai? She suddenly became anxious, struggling with her body and looking around. Li Lei noticed her movement. "Don't move, Xiaoling, the avalanche hasn't passed yet." His voice was as light as a whisper, and he leaned against a big stone. The moment the avalanche happened, the survival instinct he had honed over the years in the wild and on the battlefield allowed him to spot the big rock immediately, and without thinking, he rushed in with her in his arms. A large rock resisted the avalanche, forming a small safe space, and they survived until now. Xiaoling still struggled and made a vague sound, "Hui, Xiaowai." Li Lei understood what she was saying and was silent for a moment before saying, "He will be fine." "Xiaoling, don't move around. If it triggers a bigger avalanche, you will be in trouble. You have to live well and wait for the avalanche. Once it's over, we can find Xiao Hui." His voice was steady and strong, with a strange soothing power. She was still very irritable, but she barely restrained herself and didn't make any noise. She waited anxiously. She had never felt that time was so long. The roar of the wind and snow outside continued. She didn't know how long it took, maybe seconds, or hours, before it finally calmed down. Xiaoling came out of Li Lei's arms immediately and wanted to stand up, but couldn't. Only then did she realize that they were trapped in a small space between a few natural boulders. "I'm going out to find Xiaowai," she said eagerly, trying to dig out the snow outside. Li Lei took her hand and said, "Don't move. If there is a landslide, we will all be buried." Xiaoling was so anxious that she almost cried. "What should we do? The child is so young and can't last long in the snow." She couldn't imagine how little Xiaowai would survive alone in the harsh snowy mountains. Li Lei said, "He is a brave child, he will be fine." He didn't know whether he was comforting Xiaoling or himself. He pulled her behind him. "I'll dig it." He is more experienced than her and knows where to dig and where there is danger. Xiaoling took a few steps back and looked up at him, digging worriedly. This small hiding place was blocked by boulders and ice and snow, and the light was very dark. It was not until he was close to the ice and snow that she could see clearly. Your head is injured. She suddenly remembered that in his arms the sweet smell of blood that she tasted while inside turned out not to be her injury. It's him. Lilei raised his hand and wiped the blood on his forehead. It's a small injury, it's not a problem. This was the wound caused by the hail when he protected her from throwing herself behind the boulder. It hurt for a while and bled a little. In such cold weather, the bleeding actually stopped quickly, it just looked scary. She was very distressed. She groped for a long time in her luggage, found gauze, and wrapped it around him. When her forehead came into contact with the gauze, he wanted to scold her not to waste first aid supplies. If subordinates or mercenaries in the same team had done this, he would have expelled them from the team long ago. In the wild, sometimes a little gauze and medicine can mean a life. How can you waste extravagant money on such a small injury? However, she is not his subordinate. She is just a woman who panicked because she cared about him. Lilei felt his heart warm, and all the reprimands he was about to say melted like ice and snow without a trace. It is said that people in love have zero IQ. Classmate Li Xiaoliai, who has zero IQ, allowed her to carefully bandage his wound. Then, he took out a piece of gauze from his medicine bag and added it to her medicine bag. Xiaoling said, "What are you doing?" "Lilei, it's too heavy, use mine first." She looked at the snow chisel, snow shovel and other items he was carrying. Without doubting that he was there, she let him put the life-saving supplies into her backpack. Lilei carefully dug a hole in the snow, and finally, a ray of skylight shone down. He piled the snow he had dug out under his feet to form a snowdrift for stepping on, and climbed out first. Seeing that there was no danger, he stretched out his hand to pull Xiaoling out. Xiaoling's feet set foot on the outside world again. Avalanches in the mountains come and go as quickly as they come. At this time, the weather has already cleared up, and the blue sky is cloudless. The whole snow-capped mountains are reflected in the crystal clear and solemn light, making them as gorgeous as a fairyland. The landscape has changed drastically, and it is no longer clear where we came from and where we are going. Xiaoling looked around and found no trace of Xiaohui, not even the slightest clue left behind. She was so anxious that the tone of her voice changed. "What should we do? Where should we find Xiaohui?" Lilei took out the compass. Fortunately, in the avalanche just now, this military compass was only slightly distorted and deformed, which did not affect its function. He fixed his position and said to Xiaoling, "The snow is rolling down from the mountain. Xiaohui should have been rushed down the mountain, let's look in that direction." Speaking, he pointed in a direction. Xiaoling was about to go there in a hurry. Lilei grabbed her and said, "Follow me." The road after an avalanche is very loose and covered with soft snow, which is very dangerous. There may be cliffs or snow pits somewhere, and something will happen if you are not careful. He wouldn't let her go ahead. She barely controlled herself from walking in front of him, but her anxiety was burning. "Hurry up, Xiaohui is so young, what should I do if I can't hold it?" As she spoke, she wanted to cry again, and raised her hands and shook her head. Wiping his eyes, knowing that now was not the time to be vulnerable, he followed Lilei's steps to search. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 736. Chapter 736 Golden Rescue Time. The two of them walked in the snow for a while. I don't know how far I walked, but Lilei suddenly stepped on something hard under his feet, which was not the feeling that ice and snow should have. He suddenly stopped. Xiaoling asked him, "What's wrong?" Lilei didn't say anything. He squatted down and dug into the snow layer with some trembling. Having been on the battlefield for many years, he felt vaguely aware of what he was stepping on. it was the feeling of a frozen corpse. He prayed that the body would not be his son, and it took a lot of effort to dig out the snow. Fortunately, no. Under the snow layer, there is an unfamiliar face, pale and twisted, with an expression that still contains the disbelief and panic at the moment of death. Lilay carefully identified the body and saw that the corpse was wearing cheap amateur mountain climbing clothes and a fluorescent bracelet on its wrist. It was the group of people who had followed them along the way and caused the avalanche. He told Xiaoling this discovery. Xiaoling's mood was a bit complicated. Seeing the corpse died in such a tragic way, she sympathized with it, but she also felt gloating and resentment in her heart. If they hadn't been yelling, how could there have been an avalanche? If there was no avalanche, how could her Xiaowai disappear? In a blink of an eye, Lilay had already dug up a lot of the nearby snow. I saw many corpses lying strewn about under the snow, all from the previous tour group. Xiaoling also went to help and dug out the remaining snow. With unspeakable fear in her heart, she wished she could dig out all the nearby snow in an instant so that she could confirm that Xiao Hui did not die here. She would rather find nothing here than see his body. Perhaps God heard her prayer. When all the nearby corpses were dug out, it turned out that Xiao Hui was not there. Xiaoling breathed a long sigh of relief, lost all strength and fell to the ground. The mountain wind blew through her hair, tying it into knots one by one. She didn't know whether it was cold sweat or snow water. Lilay checked all the luggage on the corpses and collected all the food and medicine. Due to the avalanche, they would be delayed in the mountains longer than expected, so it would be a good idea to collect more supplies. After doing all this, he said to Xiaoling, "Let's go, let's continue to find Xiao Hui." She took one last look at the corpses, trying her best not to imagine what Xiao Hui had become now, and kept walking forward. The two walked a long way without finding any trace of Xiao Hui, so they changed directions and continued searching. This time, they found a glove left by the child in a small snow pit. "These are Xiao Hui's gloves." Xiaoling took 3 steps at a time and then 2 steps to pick up the gloves. She couldn't remember it wrong. This was the style and color she chose for him herself, and she put it on his little hand when she set out. She put down her gloves and searched around, even digging through the snow with Lilay. However, except for the glove, they found nothing. Having the immediate hope ruthlessly extinguished is more devastating than not having any hope at all. Xiaoling felt that all her strength had been drained from her body, and she fell into the snow pit, tears oozing from the corners of her eyes. Her child, still so young, must be so vulnerable and vulnerable to the unreasonable power of nature. How should he survive without the protection of adults? A hand gently put her shoulder. "Xiaowai will be fine," Lilay's voice said. This time, it didn't bring her the slightest bit of comfort. She suddenly turned her head and glared at him fiercely through her tears. "Why didn't you save him? Why didn't you save him during the avalanche? He is so young, he is just a child. You are his father. You know it's his father? Why don't you save him?" With a cry, my heart was broken with tears. Lilay's hand on her shoulder tightened and he remained silent. The situation was so critical that he couldn't think at all, and his body's first instinctive reaction was to protect her in his arms. If he could only choose one between mother and son, he would choose her. Even though it was cruel to Xiaowai and failed to fulfill his responsibilities as a father, he would do this even if he was given another chance. Choose. If he loses her, what's the point of his world? However, she didn't understand, so she cried and threw his hand away. "You are not worthy of being his father." Lilay silently endured her resentment, unable to argue with it. He raised his head and saw that the sky was getting darker. He said in a hoarse voice, "Xiaoling, we need to find a place to stay, otherwise we will freeze to death in the snowy mountains." She choked and said, "I want to find Xiaowai." She struggled to get up and stumbled forward. He pulled her close to his arms. "Obey." She struggled to grab his hand, still crying, I want to find him. What if he is still alive? He must still be alive. But, it's so cold at night, what will he do? What if he can't make it to tomorrow? What to do in the morning? How can you find someone in the dark in the mountains? Lilei finally got angry. Xiaoling, please be honest and find a place to rest. Are you looking for a child? Okay. I'll go. If you fall into a snow pit, come out. What happened? What should I tell Xiaowai when he comes back? She stopped crying and looked up at him. Are you going? She asked hesitantly. Lilei took her hand and walked towards the mountain wall. I know how to survive in the wild and I am safer than you. Now I will find you a cave and you can have a good rest. I will take the child back home tomorrow morning. Around you. His voice was steady and unmistakable. Xiaoling stopped talking, lowered her head, and followed him step by step. After walking for a long time, we arrived at a cave. He went in, lit a fire for her, and hurried out again. Xiaoling watched his figure walking step by step into the wind and snow. Such a handsome and strong man seemed shaky and small in front of the roar of nature. She suddenly regretted that she shouldn't have lost her temper with him. It was not his fault that the child was lost. It was not easy for him to protect someone in an avalanche. Lilei, she rushed to the entrance of the cave and called him. He turned back from the wind and snow in the cold night, and the light of the flashlight flickered. You. She hesitated, and finally said with some difficulty, don't go looking for Xiaohui. It's too dangerous at night. Let's go together tomorrow morning. If it was just to appease her unreasonable troubles, who knew that this man would risk his life involved in danger? Although she was worried about Xiaowai, she was also worried about him. Hearing this, Lilei smiled, and his hurt eyes melted away like ice and snow, full of spring breeze. I'm fine, he said. The 72 hours after the disappearance are the golden time for rescue. Xiaohui must be found as soon as possible. Xiaoling, I am not angry with you, I am serious. Although it is dangerous at night, it is not enough for me to go out. It's not beyond my reach. I'm very capable of surviving in the wild, don't worry. After saying that, he turned around and disappeared into the snow. No more tonight. I originally planned to catch up tonight, but, I went to watch The End of the World, it was so good, TT. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 737. Chapter 737 Eyes in the Dark. Xiaoling spent the night anxiously. Huddled around the fire, looking at the warm and dancing light of the flames, my mind followed Lilei into the vast darkness outside the cave, feeling uneasy. I wonder if he can find Xiaowai. In such a big snowy mountain, will something happen to him and Xiaohui? Her heart seemed to be squeezed by an invisible hand, making her breathless. However, she knew that this was not going to work. Lilei kept her here, partly because she had little experience in surviving in the wild and it was too dangerous to go out late at night to find people, but also because he wanted her to have a good rest. After all, she would have to walk on a very difficult mountain road tomorrow. She cannot waste her precious time in vain worries. She closed her eyes and forced herself to fall asleep. After counting countless sheep, she finally fell asleep amidst the howling cold wind. He didn't sleep deeply, and his dreams were disturbed and chaotic. Suddenly woke up. She opened her eyes, and there was darkness all around. The fire in the cave had been extinguished at some point, and the charcoal fire with residual warmth exuded a bright and dark red luster among the ashes. Outside the cave, the howling wind stopped at some point. A soft crunch sound. It was something that stepped on the branches in the fire. Xiaoling was startled and looked over instinctively. Only then did she realize that there was a pair of green eyes in the darkness, silently staring at her. The hairs all over her body were about to explode. For a moment, Even her breathing froze and her mind went blank. She didn't dare to move at all. She stood stiffly facing the thing, and thoughts were running wildly in her mind. What was that? Snow leopard? Wolf? When did you come in? Is it going to eat people? Her fingers were clenched, and the knuckles of her phalanges were faintly white due to tension. Slowly, she touched the dagger stuck on the outside of her boots. Before departure, the advance team brought back reports that wolves and several other dangerous animals occasionally appeared in the snowy mountains. Lele specially equipped her with a gun and a dagger. Now, the gun has long been lost during the avalanche, but the dagger has always been there. The sharp blade is tempered with a powerful anesthetic. As long as it can with a stab, even an elephant can be brought down. She was flustered and told herself to stay calm and not be afraid. However, just before her fingers touched the handle of the dagger and she was about to pull it out, the unknown beast on the opposite side suddenly pounced on her. She was so surprised that she had no time to react rationally. She instinctively rolled up and barely avoided the first wave of attacks from the beast. The beast's sharp teeth bit into the sleeve of her mountaineering jacket. With a zero sound, the sleeve was torn open with a long gaping hole, and the stuffing inside flew everywhere. She didn't have time to be afraid and tried to pull out the dagger on the side of the leggings. However, because the weather was too cold, she couldn't pull it out after several pulls. She broke out in a cold sweat. When she looked up, the beast had stopped attacking at some point and was leaning down slightly, looking at her warily and doubtfully. The moonlight shines through the clouds. Xiaoling saw clearly that the person attacking her was a silver-gray snow wolf. It must have been since it had not eaten for a long time, and its body was so thin that one could see its ribs. However, the light in its eyes was green and faint, like a hellfire or a will-o'-the-wisp. It's as chilling as a steel cone. The snow wolf bared its teeth at her and pounced on her again as fast as lightning. Xiaoling rolled up in a panic again, her long hair spread out, blocking her sight. She felt her body weighing heavily and being caught by something. When she looked up, she saw the hungry wolf's head very close at hand, its green eyes looking at her without any emotion. Its paws trampled on her. She couldn't dodge, and watched helplessly as it bit it down. She just barely moved it inward, avoiding the vital part of her neck. The hungry wolf bit her on the shoulder, and this time, it still bit through the thick mountaineering clothing, and the fillings scattered all over again under the force of the beast. A sour, indescribable smell spread throughout the room. Xiaoling was very grateful for this mountaineering jacket. The quality was so good that the two attacks of the hungry wolf could not really bite her flesh due to its thickness. However, the mountaineering jacket he was wearing was also in disrepair, and the smell of unknown stuffing became even stronger in the air. The hungry wolf sniffed his nose and lowered his body. He did not continue to attack her, but instead let out a low whine. Xiaoling took advantage of its hesitation, finally pulled out the dagger next to her boot, and stabbed it hard with a single blow. Helpless, the noise caused by her attack alerted the hungry wolf enough. It ducked away, as if it had been awakened, and opened its mouth to bite her again. The next battle was in darkness. Xiaoling had no experience in fighting ferocious beasts in the wild and lacked strength, so she struggled to defend. The hungry wolf obviously had several opportunities to bite her throat out, but once it got close to the damaged mountaineering clothing she was wearing, the strange stench emanating from it always made it restless. That's it, I don't know how long the stalemate lasted. Xiaoling was injured on her body and face, and her donated blood spattered all over the floor during the fight. The hungry wolf was not feeling well either. The fur on his body was rubbed by her dagger, and he was affected by the anesthetic, making his movements a little sluggish. However, it had not eaten for several days, so it took the risk to attack the human camp. Now it smelled the blood on Xiaoling's body, which aroused its ferocity. Seizing an opportunity, it jumped and knocked Xiaoling down again. This time, Xiaoling lost too much blood in the long battle and lacked physical strength, so the dagger in her hand flew out. The hungry wolf lost all scruples about the dagger and endured the stench coming from her mountaineering clothes, then opened his mouth and bit her. It was not fast, but she was even more exhausted and unable to escape. She felt cold in her heart and thought, "It's over." She didn't expect that after living 2 lifetimes, the final outcome would be to be buried in a wolf's mouth. I don't know what happened to Xiao Hui and Li Lei. If they are still alive, they will find that she has died when they find her back here. Would it be sad to die? Xiao Hui. Li Lei. She misses them so much. In a daze, she didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but she suddenly saw the face of a handsome man. The man had a strong figure and his brows were as deep as sculptures. He held a dagger in his hand and stabbed it into the back of the hungry wolf's head with just one strike. The hungry wolf lying on her body didn't even have time to whimper before he fell down and died. The man kicked away the hungry wolf's body and picked her up. "Xiaoling? Xiaoling. Are you okay? Tell me where you are injured. Support, you must support. Li Lei." She murmured, feeling that she was being held in a solid and powerful embrace, and her whole cold and painful body was leaning on her. She smelled the familiar scent on his body and felt the rise and fall of his chest under his hiking clothes. Suddenly, she couldn't bear it anymore and cried out. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 738. Chapter 738. Thanks to Mr. Ermau. The tears couldn't be stopped, as if I wanted to express all the grievances I had felt that night. The more she cried, the more scared she became. What if she hadn't just woken up when the hungry wolf came? What if she didn't have a dagger on her body? What if the hungry wolf hesitated for some reason and seemed hesitant in its actions? What if Li Lei didn't arrive in time? It was only then that she realized that she had a lot of luck in surviving. With one sound, she cried so hard that her heart broke. It was the most instinctive fear originating from the depths of human heart. Her body was trembling, she hugged his broad shoulders tightly and buried her face in his arms. "It's okay, it's okay." Li Lei comforted her softly, stroking her soft long hair with his rough hands. His eyes, however, calmly looked around, looking from the wolf he killed, to quickly seeing the entire cave environment, and then looking at the direction of the wind outside, frowning slightly. "Where is it hurt?" he asked. "I will bandage it for you." Xiaoling shook her head. The life and death struggle just now was too intense. She was so nervous that she even forgot about the pain. Li Lei slightly pulled her away from him and checked her injuries. As soon as the two of them separated, her whole body was exposed. On her chest, arms, waist, the mountaineering jacket on the outside was extremely damaged, and the stuffing inside had almost scattered, and it was stained with blood and smell. Qi filled the cave. Li Lei saw that there were no major wounds on her body and breathed a sigh of relief. Took out the medicine bag and quickly stopped the bleeding and bandaged her. She hadn't recovered from the shock just now, so she remained motionless and allowed him to bandage her. After a long while, she felt her thoughts gradually return to her mind. She moved her lips, and her first question was, "We've found Xiao Hui." The voice is hoarse, like the wind and frost outside. Li Lei kept bandaging her. "We found it. The child fell into a gap in a cave with a hot spring. It's very safe. But her ankle is a little sprained. Although it's not broken, it's not easy to walk," he said. "After taking care of the last injury on her body, it's too dark and it's too dangerous to bring him back directly. I'm here to pick you up. When it gets light, you and I will go there to meet him." "Really?" She looked at him eagerly. "You didn't lie to me." "How could it be?" Li Lei smiled. "Our son is very clever. When I went there, he had already set his own bones. Without a lighter, he used the heat of the hot spring to melt snow water, ate dry food, and gained strength and strength. He is in good spirits. He said, "Don't worry, mother. He has lived in the mountains with his uncle since he was a child, so he is not afraid." Xiaoling breathed a sigh of relief. However, he became worried again the next second. It's so dark outside, and he's still so young. Lilei, why don't you stay with him over there? Come back to me when it gets dark. Lilei was silent for a moment and then said, "I'm always not at ease." He originally planned to come back to her at dawn. However, as if he had a premonition, he became restless and inexplicable emotions controlled him, making him unable to control the urge to come back no matter what. Perhaps, this is the meaning of sycamore wood. Every time, when she was in danger, he would always appear by her side. Fortunately, he is back. But Xiaoling asked, "Will there be ferocious beasts over there?" She glanced at the dead body of the hungry wolf in the cave and couldn't help but tremble. What if Xiao Hui's side also got ferocious beasts? When talking about this issue, Lilei looked a little strange. No, after a pause, he said, "It's very safe over there." Xiaoling was still worried and wanted to fly to Xiaohui. "Let's leave quickly." "Wait a minute," Lilei said, "your hiking clothes are damaged, and you will freeze to death if you go out like this. So, you can find a tarpaulin from my backpack, as well as some needle and thread, and I will help you deal with it." As he said that, he had already begun to collect the flock fillings scattered on the ground. Xiaoling followed her words and rummaged through his backpack. Now that she was calmer, she felt that the stench on her body was so unbearable. "What exactly is the stuffing in mountaineering clothes?" "It stinks," Xiaoling said. "It's goose down," Lilei replied. "Then this smell?" "That's Ermao's liquid excrement." Lilei thought of a slightly euphemistic way of saying it. Xiaoling almost vomited when she heard this. No wonder the smell on her body was so weird and strong, and it also contained bursts of irritation. Her face looked worse than when she just saw the hungry wolf. "What did you say?" After getting started, Lilei became more confident. "This mountaineering suit is custom made, and I specially asked them to treat the goose down like this. You know, the advance team has already reported that there are wild beasts in the mountains, and I thought that using the scent of Ermao could help shock them. Ermao is a very strong leopard, one that can challenge tigers. Ordinary snow leopards and wolves can only take a detour when they see it. It can indeed avoid many dangers by using its scent." A beast. Lilei cleverly sealed its scent in his mountaineering clothes so that it would be indistinguishable to humans, so he didn't tell Xiaoling. However, this smell can be keenly detected by wild animals. If the hungry wolf hadn't been too hungry, he wouldn't have had the courage to take the risk. Xiaoling. Only then did she realize what she had been wearing for so many days. Thinking about it made her feel very complex. However, this hiking jacket with added materials did come in handy. She guessed that the reason why the hungry wolf hesitated when fighting her was because of the smell of Ermao. She thanked the strong leopard in her heart. Cooperating with Lilei, he used a waterproof cloth to mend the gaps in the mountaineering clothes. "Okay, let's go." Lilei stretched out his hand towards her and pulled her up from the ground. "They can't stay here, there are blood stains everywhere in the cave, and the wind direction is very unfavorable to them, and the smell of blood will soon spread deeper into the mountain. They must leave immediately before other beasts come to investigate." Stepping out of the cave, there was already a dim dawn in the sky, and a first quarter moon as thin as a cicada's wing hung high in the sky. Its clear and cold light reflected the ice and snow, making it look like a lonely fairyland. Her long hair was blown up. Lilei put her hood tighter on, gesturing for her to follow in his footsteps. Step by step, he led her towards Xiao Hui's location. After walking for about 2 hours, we turned around a large frozen stone, revealing a narrow gap inside. Lilei said to Xiaoling, "Xiao Hui is hiding here, be careful, I will take you down." He took the lead in squeezing into the gap, took over Xiaoling's equipment, and brought in her people. Xiaoling looked around and saw a small hot spring and a sight that left her speechless. Yingying is going out now. The last update will be delayed. It will be updated before 12 midnight. P.S. A reader asked me what book I was reading yesterday. Well, Doomsday Paradise. It was very good. It was from Kitty and Female Channel. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up Channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 739. Chapter 739, All the Little Animals Like Me. She finally knew why Lilei looked so weird when she asked, "Will Xiaowei be attacked by wild beasts?" Near a fountain, there was a giant python as thick as two people hugging each other. Its dark green skin with colorful patterns looked like it was not a good stubble. However, such a terrifying creature is now coiled around its body like a pet snake, allowing a small child to sit on its smooth scales. In order to prevent the child from sliding down, it carefully made a guardrail with the tip of its tail. Xiaoling was stunned. Mom, Xiao Xiaowei was very happy when he saw her coming, waving his short hands and legs excitedly. Then he said to the giant python, "Send me to my mother quickly." The giant python seemed to understand what he was talking about and obediently placed the child in front of Xiaoling. Xiaoling hugged the child and checked him up and down. Seeing that he was not injured, she hurriedly asked, "What's going on? Why are you with a snake? What if it hurts you?" Hearing what she said, the snake wagged its tail dissatisfiedly. Xiaowei comforted it, "Don't be upset, I will tell Mom what a friendly snake you are." Xiaoling. Lilei also had a look on his face that he couldn't bear to look at. That's why he could safely leave Xiaohui alone and go back to find Xiaoling. Last night, when he found the cave, he saw a child riding on a giant python. He thought the child was being attacked and rushed forward to save the child immediately, but unexpectedly, Xiao Xiaowei's voice was cheerful, "Daddy, Daddy, this big snake is so cute." Cute. Lilei looked at the giant python with its head full of black lines and its exaggeratedly gorgeous patterns. It was looking at him emotionlessly with a pair of cold vertical pupils, and its triangular snake head was in an attack posture. He felt that all three views would be subverted by Xiaohui. Unexpectedly, Xiaohui slid down from the giant python in a flash, holding Lilei with one hand and touching the smooth, sticky, and scaly body of the giant python with the other. "Big snake, don't bully my dad, he is a good person." The giant python looked at the child and slowly stopped its original attack. Lilei simply felt that he could not explain this matter with any existing scientific knowledge, so he asked Xiaohui at that time, "How did you do it?" The little child looked confused, "I don't know, it seems like all the little animals like me." The question is, can this be considered a small animal? Lilei simply wanted to hit the wall. However, what pleased him was that the giant python was indeed very tame in front of Xiaohui. When the child accidentally slipped into the hot spring, he used his body to build a ladder to fish him up. Lilei took a walk around and confirmed that the giant python's lair was here. Generally speaking, water is a battleground for wild beasts. Only wild beasts can carelessly live so close to a water source or even occupy the entire water source. The strongest among them. Then, this giant python is the strongest of the nearby beasts. Since it protects Xiaohui, then Xiaohui is safe here. With this in mind, and unable to resist the uneasy feeling in his heart, he embarked on the return journey and went to find Xiaoling in advance. Now, facing the giant python and the child, Xiaoling was just as surprised as he was a few hours ago. Lilei told her how he looked when he found Xiaohui, and she slowly accepted the fact. A family of 3 sat around the hot spring under the protection of the giant python. Lilei unpacked some dry food and gave it to the 2 of them. Xiaoling hugged the child tightly, refusing to let him take another step away from her. On the other hand, Xiao Shaowai acted like a normal person. "Mom, you really don't have to worry about me. Uncle said that Phoenix's children will not die in the mountains." He seemed to have a blind superstition towards his uncle, and when he talked about it, his whole eyes were filled with tears. Sparkly. Xiaoling thought that if it hadn't been for that uncle, their family of 3 wouldn't have come here to enjoy the cold wind after being full. She took a hard bite of the dry food and asked Lilei, "What should we do next?" "Let's go up the mountain early, bury the wishful knot early, and return early." Lilei pondered for a moment. "Xiaoling, are you sure you want to continue going up the mountain?" She was slightly startled. "What?" "I." Lilei wanted to say something, but seemed a little irritated. He collected his thoughts before continuing, "We were only halfway through, and accidents happened one after another. This is not the most dangerous section of the road. I'm worried about you. I can't hold on. Your lives are more important than recognizing each other as a family." Xiaoling understood what he meant. What he wanted to say was, "Return." Xiaoling fell silent for a long time, then she stroked Xiao Hui's soft short hair in her arms and said softly, "I want to get to know my child, and I am willing to take any risks." "Actually, it's just a title," Lilei said. "Now that you have adopted him, the whole world recognizes that you are his guardian. Even if he changes his name to you mother one day, there will be no doubts from the outside world. Why take such a big risk to announce your biological child?" Xiaoling looked at him quietly, her eyes clear, but for some reason it made people feel a little scary. "Mom," Xiao Shaowai pulled her sleeve uneasily. "Lilei," she asked, "do you think I'm a burden? Or maybe you don't want to recognize Xiao Hui?" Indeed, for her, regardless of whether the outside world knew that Xiao Hui was her biological blood, it was she recognized and accepted Xiao Hui being raised by her side and even called her mother. But, what about Lilei? If this ceremony is not completed, it will not be possible to announce that the child is her biological child. Furthermore, it will not be possible to prove that the child is related to Lilei by blood. Does Lilei not want to recognize Shaowai? After all, Shaowai was not born out of wedlock, but he was his eldest son. If something happened in the future, this status would be too sensitive and embarrassing for a wealthy family. Lilei's expression was stunned for a moment. "Of course not," he said immediately. He was just afraid that he alone could not protect the mother and son. If something happened on the snowy mountain, he would never forgive himself for the rest of his life. "Then there's nothing more to say." Xiaoling's tone left no room for doubt. So, the 3 people were silent. After leaving the hot spring and bidding farewell to the giant python, they continued to climb to the top of the snow peak. This time, Lilei and Xiaoling did not speak much. Except for necessary exchanges, they did not say a word. Finally arrived at the next stop. Xiaoling was tired, so she fell asleep after eating, leaving Lilei to watch the night. Dimly, I heard 2 father and son talking. "Dad, is Mom unhappy? Don't think about things that don't happen." "It's a lie, my mother is just not happy. She thinks you don't want to recognize me." The good news is that the update on the road has been completed. This is the last update tonight. It will be released on time. Good night everyone. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 740. Chapter 740 Family. The cave became quiet again, except for the occasional beeping sound from the fire. Lilei didn't know what he was thinking about. It wasn't until Xiao Hui called Dad, that he came back to his senses. "How come Daddy disowns you?" He smiled and touched his son's little head soothingly. "Whether you can call Daddy openly or not, you are Daddy's precious son." The ceremony of the wishful knot, no matter what whether it can be completed or not, your position in my heart will not change. Little Shaowai seemed a little confused, but, without this ceremony, our family of 3 would not be able to be together openly. You and your mother. With this ceremony, can your mother and I be able to live together openly? Lilei seemed to be asking the child, but also seemed to be asking himself. Yes, with this ceremony, it can be announced to the outside world that you are ours. A biological son allows me to pursue her more directly, but this is just a means. Xiao Hui looked at him in confusion. Lilei's voice was very soft. Dad has hurt your mother before, and it's normal for her to refuse to forgive me. If she keeps refusing to forgive me, no matter how many methods are used, it will only cause trouble for her. There is no need to do this. Your lives are on the line, so Dad proposed to go down the mountain. He will chase her within the scope of ensuring her safety. However, if she is in danger, he would rather give up some pursuit and only guard her from a distance. In his heart, her safety always comes first. The cave fell silent again. Xiaoling lay on her side in a corner of the cave, unable to fall asleep. So, was this the reason why Lilei refused to continue going up the mountain? For some reason, she felt a sore and swollen feeling in her heart, which was very uncomfortable. She was suddenly not sure why she had to take her child up the mountain. As Lilei said, is it worth it just for a status? Her thoughts were a little confused, and there was something floating faintly, but she couldn't catch it. The only thing she was sure of was that she still wanted to go up the mountain. The warm light of the fire danced in the cave, and the woody aroma of burning dry wood filled the ears and nose. She heard Lilei say to Xiao Hui, "It's getting late, go to bed." The little child obediently agreed and lay down not far from her. There was a rustling sound, and it seemed that Lilei was pulling the sleeping bag on the child. "Dad," the child asked one last time before going to sleep, "will you protect us all the way to the top of the mountain?" In the silence, Lilei seemed to smile, "Yes. As long as you and your mother want to go somewhere, no matter how dangerous it is, I will protect it to the end." The child slept peacefully. Xiaoling's nose was slightly sore. This sentence evoked so many things in her mind. When they first met, he saved her several times from Pei Ziyan, and later when he risked his life to rescue her when filming a paragliding commercial, and when she fell into the water during an outdoor variety show, he also fished her out. There is also the wild wolf incident that just happened not long ago. She could hardly count how many times he had saved her. Over the years, this man has been living in her heart without knowing it. When she sees him, she feels so safe, as if she is not afraid of the sky falling. So, when he killed the hungry wolf with one knife yesterday, she immediately fell into his arms and cried, because she knew that his arms were the safest place in the world. There, she can put away all her last resort ferocity and pretense. She suddenly understood something. She wanted to go to the top of the mountain and to be recognized as a family. Perhaps it was not to recognize Xiao Hui, who had been raised by her side for a long time, but to tell the world confidently that the father of her child was him. Lilei. This name is turning over and over in my heart. I don't know when, it has already replaced Pei Ziyan. When Lilei said he wanted to return, she was so angry because she was not afraid that he would not recognize Xiao Hui. What she was more afraid of was that he no longer loved her. This realization made her a little panicked. His body was slightly heavier, and something seemed to be covered on the sleeping bag, probably his clothes. She didn't dare to move, for fear that he would find that she was still asleep, and the person next to her seemed to have not left, so he sat down in the open space beside her. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to be able to feel his presence through the sleeping bag and the cold outside air, exuding warm body heat. In a daze, he fell asleep. When she woke up, she glanced at her waterproof watch and saw that it was already 4 o'clock in the morning. She was so excited that she fell asleep too late. It was her turn to keep watch long ago. Why didn't Lilei wake her up? When he opened his sleeping bag, he saw that Lilei had already fallen asleep, but there was still a warm and bright fire in the cave. A small figure was sitting in front of the fire, staring in the direction of the cave entrance in a daze. Xiaowai, she walked over. Xiao Xiaowai turned around and saw her. A smile bloomed on his baby-fat little face. Mom, are you awake? Look at the star over there, isn't it pretty? Xiaoling didn't want to look at the stars. She frowned and asked, why are you keeping watch? How can such a young child do such hard work? Xiao Hui tilted his head. Dad said that a man must learn to watch the night. Xiaoling was speechless. How could such a young child be considered a rough man? Your father woke you up. Her tone was a little unkind. Xiao Xiaowai blinked, weighed it in his mind, and decisively decided to sell his father. Yes, in fact, it was his father who felt sorry for his mother, so he woke him up and told him to let her sleep a little longer. Last night, her mother was because of worried about getting lost. He didn't sleep well. Xiao Xiaowai wanted to protest that he couldn't sleep well after playing with the boa constrictor all night, but after seeing the determined look on his father's face, he had no choice but to get up from his sleeping bag aggrievedly. Wow, father is abusing children. Now that his mother asked about it, he added some jealousy. Dad also asked me not to tell you what I really want. He said that if you ask, just tell me that I woke up in the middle of my sleep and took the initiative to ask for the night watch. Xiaoling's face turned dark instantly. The slightest affection for Lilei that he had before falling asleep disappeared in an instant. He ordered Xiao Hui with a stern face, go to bed. He took on the responsibility of keeping vigil. Xiao Xiaowai went to bed happily. As expected, a mother's child is a treasure. As for Dad, he's not worried. Mom will be angry for a while and it will pass. Later, she will think of how much her dad loves and protects her, and he denies her relatives because of her. Xiao Xiaowai hugged his little sleeping bag and fell asleep soon. In fact, I didn't sleep for long, and it was dawn soon. When he woke up, he saw his father making breakfast with his head hanging down, as if he had been scolded by someone. But my mother still had a dark face, but she helped my father tear open biscuits and boil snow water. That's right. Xiao Xiaowai nodded to himself in a mature manner, and his uncle said that when young couples quarrel, they quarrel at the head of the bed and at the end of the bed. Look, how harmonious it is. Tomorrow is the college entrance examination. I don't know if there are still candidates reading today. I wish you all the best results in the exam. I will wait for you to return as the king in 3 days. Come on. End of this chapter.